Greetings, everyone. Compliments of the season, and it's my pleasure to be with you here again on another episode of our show, the Never An Afterthought show. Remember, I've said it is our show. It is indeed your show, and I just have the pleasure of anchoring the show. My name is Afolabi Imoukhuede, or as you often like to call me, AI. It's my pleasure to be with you here, and I want to thank you for giving me audience into your rooms, for giving me audience into your car, or wherever it is you may be watching me or listening to me. Yes, so again, we're here onto another exciting episode. I'm sure it will be engaging as well. And we're still on our series of It Worked For Me. And if it worked for me, it would work for you. Now, what is it that worked for me that I'm saying will work for you? It's basically a set of principles, guiding principles that I developed and owned over the years, and that I shared in my book, the Never An Afterthought book that was released in June 2020. And it's those guiding principles that I call PEER. P for passion, E for integrity, E for empathy, R for reliability and resilience. In addition to that, I went on to share also three C's, a set of three C's that I wouldn't say that is that's not typically owned to me. It's not mine. It's popular now all over the globe. The set of three C's that we typically call, I like to call them in this order: character, capacity, and competence, or character, competence, capacity. Now, I also infuse E there, which is empathy, but because we have discussed empathy as part of PEER, I tend to take that out and say PEER in addition with the three C's: character, capacity, competence. And so after discussing that, we began to see the critical role of empathy. We began to see the critical role of emotions. We began to see the critical role of emotional intelligence. And when you put all that together, we also began to x-ray how that is perhaps one of the most critical edge that humans have over robots in the fourth industrial revolution. Now, let's remember that, and so that led us into the last two episodes where we've been discussing relevant skills for the fourth industrial revolution, how humans, you and I, can win over the robots in the 4IR, the fourth industrial revolution. But we soon realized, as we began to discuss right from episode 2, we soon realized how education began to feature. And that's not a surprise, because education is the bedrock of society. And so we realized that in episode 2, we talked about the education, the need to reform education in Nigeria specifically, and perhaps even across the globe. Every part of the world, it's talking about developing or improving the education system. And then, of course, as we discussed the two episodes under 4IR, the fourth industrial revolution, education also played critical, education featured a lot, because I was going through your feedbacks, and a lot of your feedbacks began to speak about education. I then promised last week that in our next episode, I'll be bringing in an education expert who will be my guest for us to discuss education. And so today I have a guest that will be joining us, but I would introduce her in a few minutes. I think what is important now is also for me, therefore, to read, as is customary, for me to read feedback, some of the feedbacks that have come in, some that relate to education, which is what we want to discuss, and some other feedbacks that came in last week that I think are important and vital for our audience. But just before I do that, let's remember that we can join this conversation using the hashtag Never An Afterthought. And you can join this conversation across all our social media channels: on Twitter, which is at NAA_book, on Facebook and Instagram, which is at NA Afterthought. And sure, you can drop me a note via email, podcast at neveranafterthought.com. Better still, and perhaps easier for you, you can also drop your comments on the platform by which you are listening to me or watching me, and we would always make it a point of duty to glean your comments and use your comments to determine the next set of conversations, just as we have always done. So today, I want to read a few comments that have come in. I'll be saving the ones on education last, but before we do that, there were a few comments that came in on YouTube, and one came from Michael Hola, and the question was, first it was a compliment to Adora, and saying that hope that we'll bring her back again. We'll keep bringing her back as often as we need to. But our question is this. Sometimes, I don't know if it's her, I guess Michael, so I guess it's a he. This is my question is, sometimes we go into a company with so much zeal to do so much and be creative, but in Nigeria that we are, many companies take advantage of their staff, which discourages and kills the fire. How do one manage that? Well, my short answer to that, it's an open conversation. I'm sure I would encourage some of our audience and subscribers to also leave their comments. But my short answer to that is that you need to keep doing what you're doing. As we listened to Adora speak last week, she mentioned that in this era, employers are looking for you to do beyond the regular. They're looking for you to be more than is expected. So if that's what is given in the era that we're in right now, I understand that yes, you can be demotivated, but I would encourage you to keep motivating yourself. I dealt with this in one of the questions that happened, I think in episode 2. If you didn't watch it, you may want to watch episode 2 when I talked about how I typically use peer to motivate myself when I come across demotivating circumstances. And the reason you want to do that, I'll give you 2 reasons. One is because with whatever you do, you're actually developing yourself. So it's less of who to whom you do it for, be it your company or others, but it's more about you. And there are actually opportunities of self-development. Now, the second point, my second answer to that will be that let's also understand that others are watching. So yes, your company may be taking advantage. Your company may not be appreciative or motivating enough, but there are many more that are watching beyond your line managers. Let's remember, in every organization, you have internal and external customers. So your internal customers, which is your organization, which is your line manager, they may be taking advantage. But trust me, your external customers most often will not take advantage. And I have stories, and I shared some in the book, wherein sometimes the benefit for what you do does not come from the direct source, but from a lot of related and unrelated indirect sources. So I want to encourage you to continue to build your creativity. Very important. Those are the critical core of what gives us, the humans, edge over machines or robots in the 4th industrial revolution. So Michael, keep the fire burning, okay? The next comment, still on YouTube, came from Awolesi Shola. And it says, this conversation is revealing, but already the impact is here. And it has created a lot of unemployment. So in other words, it's saying the impact of this whole robots taking over our jobs, machines taking over our jobs, machine learning, AI, everything we've been discussing, that impact is here. It's not about to get here. The impact is here already. And that's why it says we have the massive unemployment, right? It says this now emphasizes the critical thinking and creative ability of people that could be deployed to create jobs and build their entrepreneurial skills. These days, job vacancies are in short supply, so we need more enterprises And we need creative and critical thinking to get this done. Awodero Adeshola from Canada. Thank you so much, Mr. Woderu. And let me say thank you so much for Michael for those comments. There was another one on YouTube as well. And it says, are there books you can recommend on critical thinking? Yes, there are books. The short answer to that is that there are books, and I would recommend two. One being Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. And the other would be Factfulness, the book called Factfulness by Hans Rosling. Now, those are two books. But then again, remember, as we shared, critical thinking is not limited to just books. It's not limited to the books on that subject matter. It's actually about your multi-dimensional, aspect of multi-dimensional human being that we are and that you are. So, you want to open yourself up beyond just these books to, all the many sources that we spoke about, watching movies, playing games, adventures, and things like that to build your critical thinking. But yes, these are what I consider two bestsellers. I've experienced the learnings from the book of the Thinking Fast and Slow personally by Daniel Kahneman, but you can also get another one, which is Factfulness by Hans Rosling. Just before I move on to the feedback we'll be dealing today with my guest on education, I want to mention there was a feedback from Instagram by Adetong from Abuja, and a comment is, nice program. The people were so engaged as I was reading the charts, the charts in the comments, which is why I said that you can actually leave your comments on the platform by which you're watching or listening to us. So I'm going to be joined today by a special guest. She's very dear to me. It's a sister and a special guest in the person of Dr. Modupe Adefeso-Olateju. But remember those comments we had about education, those comments that came and I read in our last episode. We're going to be engaging those comments today, and I won't be doing it alone. I'll be doing it with my guest, Mo, simply called Mo, but I would introduce her after the break. Thank you. If you're just joining us, thank you. You're welcome to the Never An Afterthought show. Today we're discussing the topic, education, the gateway to relevant skills in the fourth industrial revolution. You remember, you can continue to join this conversation with the hashtag Never An Afterthought across all our social media platforms, Twitter at NAA_book, Facebook and Instagram at NA Afterthought, and you can always drop me a note via email, podcast at neveranafterthought.com. As I mentioned just before the break, I'm joined by Dr. Modupe Adefeso-Olateju, simply known as Mo, today to discuss this topic, education, the gateway to relevant skills for the fourth industrial revolution. She is an education policy expert specializing in public-private partnership in education, the MD CEO of the Education Partnership Center, TEP, Nigeria's pioneering education partnership organization in Nigeria, where she advises a lot of education sector policy experts. Greetings, Mo. It's good to have you.
Thank you very much, Afolabi.
How's it been?
It's been very interesting. It's been a most unusual 8 to 9 months of the year, but we've been forging ahead, doing new things, exciting things, learning once again how to be a teacher, as many parents are doing these days, and learning how to hold it all together. And I guess also learning, once again, why education is really important.
Thank you. And Mo, you started on it's really education has been one of, I mean, every part of our world has been hit by the corona, right? By the COVID-19, but mostly education as well. I mean, parents, the kids are at home, parents as we're now having to do distance learning, online learning, all sorts of different innovative ways to learning. What can you say? What can you tell us about that? And how does this, what is happening right now and what you've been experiencing, as you mentioned, the last 8-9 months, how does this portend the future? How does it lead us into the future that is now here?
I think maybe an illustration might work there. You know, I was in a meeting in February of this year, and there was a series of complaints from the conveners of the meeting saying, why don't we have more people at this meeting? This shows unseriousness, lack of commitment. And I remember making a suggestion, and I said, you know what, why don't we stream this meeting? And why don't we make it online so that those who are not able to be here, it's very early on a Saturday morning and people are tired. So why don't we create an opportunity for people to join us remotely? And there was a bit of a pushback, you know, no, you need to be here in person. We can't do this remotely. And cut a very long story short, by the next month, all of those meetings were held remotely. And they are still being held remotely.
Wow.
What does that tell us? It tells us that we have lived in the future for a long time, but we haven't actually realized it. You know, sometimes when I talk to contemporaries in the field, we reflect on how it is that we're preparing children in Nigeria for the 21st century. So we'll talk about 21st century learning and 21st century skills. But remember that the 21st century actually started 20 years ago. So we've lived in this future for a while, but we haven't realized it because we've been very comfortable, you know, living in the past. But I think that the pandemic has created more than one shock, many different types of shocks. And within the education sector, I think that what it has revealed is that we really do need to get a bit more serious about positioning the children who live within the geographical space called Nigeria for the future, positioning them for the world that we refer to as the future, but which started several years ago. And so it's really asking us to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, whether as policymakers or as private citizens, development actors, and begin to think a bit more strategically and also become a bit more purposeful in how we plan for education in Nigeria.
Mo, you're so right. And the truth is, we've always talked about this context of reform education, right? We've always talked about our young people being digital natives. But just like you say, right now, the world has had to go digital. I'm sure this meeting you were talking about was not a meeting of young people. It's a meeting of the older ones that would always hit any and everything digital. So it means that the future is already upon us. And I like that point you said. I mean, 21st century started 20 years ago. And it probably is just taking COVID to let us understand that the future is upon us. But when we really talk about this reform education or getting relevant skills for the for future of work or for fourth industrial revolution, What does this reform education really mean? What does it mean? What should we be reforming?
So I think the rethinking is really around what exactly do we want our country to be able to do? What do we see? What is the vision that we have for the nation state called Nigeria? I think it really starts from there. At Tech Center, we've created a model for educational planning, and it is a spoke and a wheel. A spoke, well, the center is a wheel, and then you have the spokes. And at the heart of it is this vision. Where are we going? Do we know where we're going? Oh, we have plans. We have lots and lots of plans. But do we really know where we're going? If you tap someone on the street tomorrow and say, where is Nigeria going to be in 2050? And then you tap somebody else and ask them, you'll probably have as many answers as many taps as you give to people, because everyone has their own perception of where Nigeria is going. So what is the shared vision? So it starts from there. The next question is, how do we take our people into that future, right? And that question is actually a function of curriculum. But when I say curriculum, I'm not referring to math and English and physics and chemistry, which are curricular subjects. But I'm referring to curriculum as a roadmap that helps a nation state, that helps an entity plan for and enter into its own desired future. So the curriculum helps us as a roadmap. Say, this is where we're going. This is where Nigeria is positioning for the year 2050 or for the year 2100 or 2100. And these, therefore, are the skills and the competencies that we want our people to have. This is the sort of knowledge that they need to possess. And these are the sort of values, the sort of ethics that they need to embody if we are going to find ourselves in that desired future. It is only after you have done that that you can begin to ask all the other questions that we have placed, in the spoke and the wheel. And those questions are around, so what exactly are we supposed to be teaching? Who is supposed to be teaching? Who is supposed to be included in this process? How do we resource this process? How do we think about grades? What should be taught at early years? What should be taught at primary? What should be taught at secondary? Do we need to continue to reinvent the wheel, or do we need to break that wheel a little bit and then create a new one that helps us to position for the future that we're heading for? And I think that if anything has caused a disruption, in the last X number of years, definitely COVID has. My greatest fear is that once there is perhaps a vaccine and it's become accessible, to lots and lots of persons, across the world, then countries like Nigeria may relax and go back to what we refer to as the norm. And so when COVID is over, there's a risk that we simply go back to what we called normal. But the reality is that that normal doesn't actually exist anymore. There is a number of webinars that I attended, in the thick of the pandemic, and one of them was a webinar organized by the Harvard University, and this professor was sharing eloquently about some models that they have run, and they have come to the conclusion that by the year 2050, only 10% of American universities will still exist in the form that they exist today. So if in the United States of America, the disruption is happening already, there's nothing they can do about it except align and position themselves to take advantage of those opportunities. Then I think that, countries like Nigeria need to be instructed. That's what I'd say.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think we don't have a choice but to break the wheel, because we can already see where the output of the wheel and the unemployment, just like the comment that came from Mr. Woodell in Canada, the unemployment that we face. He then mentioned the fact that there's always, even the trend supports that there will always be a short supply of formal jobs, right? As we used to know it, the formal jobs. So there's a need to engage creativity and critical thinking in the formation or development of enterprises. And if we already are saying that the reason why we have the huge unemployment is because, like employers like to say, and the term you hear a lot, employable, our people are not employable, or our people are not relevant to the skills that we need now, or our people are not trained to be entrepreneurs. It tells us already that the output is faulty. So this wheel must be broken to address the knowledge, the skills, the attitude that are going to be relevant going forward. So what should we, I mean, what, for example, or in fixing the things you started to talk about, how should we be teaching? Because I think there's a lot to do about how we should also be teaching to be able to build critical thinking or the cerebral, or to tap into the cerebral prowess and capacity of our learners. So how should we be thinking? How should we be teaching, sorry? Or how should our children be learning?
I think that's a very important question. Yeah, I think Afolabi, that's a very, very important question. And of course, it's difficult to separate teaching, from learning, particularly when children are younger. When you talked about how the outcomes are not working, I think it's useful to backtrack a little bit and just re-emphasize that point, because I think that it's a point that is noted, but is not noted as consciously, as one might like. We have issues in Nigeria around access, around quality, and around the relevance of education. In terms of access, I mean, the data from the Universal Basic Education Commission tells us that as of 2018, 10.3 million Nigerian children were not in school, right? Access issues.
Yeah.
Now, quality. We conducted a survey 2017 and 2018 called the Learn Nigeria Citizen-Led Household Assessment. We visited about 49,000 households altogether. We surveyed 49,000 children. We visited 21,000 households across all the 6 geopolitical zones. And by the time we analyzed the data, we found that only 55% of children in GSS 3 had literacy competencies that children of the age 9 years old should possess. So children in GSS 3 were not literate to the level that the primary 3 child should be. And indeed, only 16% of children who were in primary 3, who should have learned these skills the previous year, were actually literate, 16%. Okay, so those are children that managed to make it into school. Third, demographic dividends. We're not reaping the benefits of that. The National Bureau of Statistics has told us that as at Q2 this year, 2 out of 5 young people, 15 to 34 years old, did not have a job. And as you've rightly said, and it's a term that I really, really do not like to use, but I think it's the reality of employers, and I am one as well, which is that a lot of young people are simply not employable. They simply don't possess this. There's a disconnect between what is taught in school and the realities of the workplace, or realities of the business space if you're an entrepreneur, or realities of the technical and vocational space if that's your specialization. There is just a bit of a disconnect. And so when we think about what we should be teaching and how our children should be learning, I think one critical question that I also want to address is who should be teaching, because you really can't give what you don't have. So really, can we start from there? Who should be teaching, right? And can we think about how, for example, we can increase the entry barriers, right? Raise them so that we get even more competent and even more cognitively able people into the teaching profession, which is not to knock those who are already teaching, but it is to say that if we're thinking strategically about being one of the leading economies in the world in a few years, then we really need to have some very, very bright minds infiltrate the education system, permeate it, and be found across board, regardless of what state you're in. So we do need talent. We do need to be very strategic about bringing talent into the sector and making sure that we can actually retain them in the sector. Then when it comes to what children should be learning, the world is teaching us already. Right now, we have curricular skills. We also have core skills. There's some people that have done some research, and they have found that there are a number of, should I call them learning paradigms that are pertinent for the world that we live in. Some people refer to them as 21st century skills. And they're classified in 3 broad areas. So they talk about learning skills, they talk about literacy skills, and they talk about life skills, right? And so when you talk about, for example, learning skills, here you're talking about critical thinking. So how do young people analyze issues to solve problems? We're talking about creativity, thinking, and being innovative about solving problems. Collaboration, working together. If there was ever a time where we needed to learn how to work together, given first of all that we know we can't even see each other physically, then that time is now. Communication, how do we express or convey our ideas in a world that is fraught with so much misinformation? And then we also talk about literacy skills, which is the second category of skills. Here we talk about digital comprehension skills, information literacy. In these days of fake news and propaganda, How do we teach young people how to use data to arrive at the truth? Media literacy. How is information published? Technology literacy, right? How do we use different devices, different tech tools to be able to elicit the sorts of skills and competencies, sort of information even that we're looking for?
Yeah.
And finally, we talk about learning skills. Finally, we can
Life
talk
skills.
about life skills. Thank you very much. And when we talk about life skills, we're really referring to that intermingling between the personal and the professional. Flexibility. Can you deviate from a plan as necessary? Or are you simply on one track? Because there's no world anymore for a person who is not flexible. Leadership. Can you motivate people to accomplish a goal? Can you take initiative? Can you start a project? Can you plan your own scheme of work, if I can put it that way? Productivity. There is so much distraction. There's Instagram, there's Facebook, there's this and that. There's so much on social media. How do you maintain your productivity in an age where there's so much distraction? And finally, social skills, right? Yeah, the machines are coming, machines are here. Still, human beings are here as well. So how do we meet with each other? How do we network with each other for mutual benefit? I like what the British Council defines as core skills. They say that these are skills that are essential for young people to have for life and for work in the global economy. They sometimes refer to them as deep learning skills, but it's really about new ways of working, new ways of thinking, new ways of living in the global world. So Afolabi, now, to pose a question back at you, can the bulk of the teachers that we have in Nigeria today take us into the desired future? Again, it's not to knock any teacher, because teachers are working hard. And I have seen some incredible teachers, nothing short of incredible. Their potential has shone so bright during this pandemic. I'm not just talking about private school teachers, public school teachers. So my interest is, how do we find those gems and how do we replicate them in the system? Because if you don't have those people, and if you don't have a solid professional development system, right, for them to even deepen those capacities, then all of these skills we're talking about, life skills, literacy skills, all these things they're just English, really. They're not going to make any difference. And Nigeria cannot afford. It is too expensive. We simply cannot afford to continue to do things business as usual. We cannot.
You said so much, and as I was just listening, I imagine audience also just having, they've been listening to you and seeing you, or hearing you affirm a lot of the things that have been said in previous episodes. For example, you spoke about life skills, and in life skills you mentioned social skills and how we need both, right? And in fact, at the last episode, one of the things that we learned is how employers actually look to our social media footprints, to make their decisions even for hiring. Collaboration. Right now, we don't even have the choice. We have to also collaborate even with machines right now, beyond just even collaborating with ourselves. But you see, the point, like you've made, is we can't afford not to really engage these conversations and really hope that our policy makers, in fact, going beyond hope, watch and support our policy makers to actually begin to take the appropriate right steps. But you see, a lot of our audience, right, are those who in some way have already left the formal school of learning, right? We know that learning never stops until we die, but they've left the formal school of learning. They are now in the world of work, or they are now in the labor market, or they are now somewhere in transition in the world of work. The question then is, how do we really practice the concept of education without walls, or education without borders? And you started to hint about it with what the research you said Harvard did, about in a few years, perhaps in some 30 years to come, only 10% will be in the form and shape and structure that we tend to know it now. A lot would have gone into all. So how do we really, how can they use or utilize this concept of education without walls to better or improve themselves, since they no longer can go back to the secondary school or the nursery school or the primary school to begin to imbibe or to be beneficiaries of these reforms that we're talking about?
Thanks, Falabi. I think that's a great question. For me, right, I separate the concept of education from schooling. I think it's really important to do that, right?
Okay.
So we go to school, we have relationships at school, we learn subjects at school, we learn skills and competencies, we come out, right? School is a place. So whether it's school on a tablet or school in a physical building, school is a place. Education is a totally different concept. Now, when you see a person, for us, I mean, I'm going to be a bit brutal here, right? I'm going to be, so pardon me.
Go ahead.
When I'm driving, or I am when I'm driving or being driven, right, on the streets, and I see someone take a paper, a wrapper, a biscuit wrapper, or a drink, that they finished, and they toss it out their window. The first thing that occurs to me is that's not an educated person. That's a person who's gone to school, maybe, but that person is not educated, right? And there are many other examples of how education does show itself in who you are as a person and in how you behave. When we were in university, they taught us about, the cognitive domain of learning, the affective domain, and the psychomotor domain. And all they were really trying to say was, look, at the end of the day, learning is not just about your cognitive development. It's also about your physical development. And it's also about your socio-emotional and indeed your spiritual development as well. And so it's really the all-roundedness of a person. And that's where the concept, I believe, of lifelong learning becomes very important. And when I was in university studying for a higher degree, I was in a department called lifelong learning, education and lifelong learning. And, the reality is that it's about you as a person making up your mind that you want to be educated. You want to continue to learn. And it's not just about, I want to get another job. It's about how you decide that you want to improve yourself. And again, it really does start from vision. What do you see yourself doing? And how do you work your way backward to ensure that you can achieve that? And it is the age we live in is referred to as the information age, which means that information abounds, right? Information absolutely abounds. There is no longer an excuse, especially if you're not in the extremely disadvantaged socioeconomic brackets. There is almost no excuse for not developing yourself. But the question is, what do you want to develop? Where do you see yourself? And that's what I would say to anyone who asked me, how do I continue to learn? How do I be a lifelong learner? It's about being clear about what your vision is. And I don't necessarily mean your vision when you're 90 years old. I mean, what do you want to achieve by next year? What do you want to achieve by the year 2025? What do you want to achieve by the year 2030? What do you want to do in between, right? We know that the world that we live in today is one where things are changing rapidly. There is so much change. You buy a phone today, by next year the phone is almost obsolete. You're wondering, why are they doing this deliberately? Why is this happening? People can't keep up, right? So what you want to do is to make sure that in the age of artificial intelligence, in the age of big data, in the age where technology tools are talking to each other, information, Internet of Things, you want to make sure that your job is not fungible. You want to make sure that a machine cannot take your job. And how do you do that? You do that simply by getting better. Whether it's by taking free courses online, paid courses, whether it's by changing your circle of friends, because interestingly, that's one factor. Whether it's by changing what you read. I joke a lot in my office about how it is that just by listening to you speak and reading what you write, I can tell exactly what you read. In fact, all I need to do is listen to you, and I can tell whether you're a person that reads business books, whether you're a person that reads academic literature, whether you're a person that reads blogs. It's easy to tell. Even if it's also easy to tell whether you're a person that doesn't read anything, right? It's actually quite easy to tell. So it's really about the individual making up their mind, and it's about the system as well. It's about the government creating the enabling environment for people to want to become lifelong learners. In many countries of the world, it's so easy to walk into a library, get a paid subscription or even a free subscription, and begin to use the tools available in the library. So it's also about creating these opportunities for people to gain knowledge and creating opportunities for people to, establish their own communities of practice and learning, create little communities around themselves where they can develop their competencies. It's not just in the interest of the individual, it's actually in the interest of the country as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, the country is the sum total of all of us, right? The individuals, all of us that make up the citizens. Mo, I'm going to take you on two more things before we call it a day. But just before we do that, let's go on a short break. Yeah.
Well, please, Auntie. It's my younger brother that follow me here. I'm the one that come for interview. I want to carry him to where we learn handwork. Please, can you sit down with me here?
Oh, no problem. You can sit there.
Oh, thank you very much. Junior, why come and sit down here? This boy, you are still pressing phone. This phone you have been pressing from house since. What are you pressing on the phone? That's why you don't know anything. Look at you like hoodlum.
I'm not pressing phone. I'm watching DIY videos and tutorials on YouTube. Yes.
You are watching DIY. No wahala now. Between you and YouTube, somebody will want each other. You will soon finish this YouTube.
But nobody can finish YouTube. Now you go tire. See, DIYs, trainings, tutorial, music, movies, you name it, there are too many. Yes.
This phone pressing generation, I'm tired of you. You will soon see. Sorry to disturb you, ma. I know it's bakery supervisor that I'm going to do interview for. But please, before we enter the oven, can you help me on the AC? Because we are sweating here like goats.
Oh, no. We got a stabilizer for the air condition, but it's not been installed and I don't know how to do it.
I can help you repair it, ma.
You learn AC work?
I watch it on YouTube tutorials and DIY videos.
If you can fix it, why not?
A few minutes later.
But I repaired it.
So AC is working now?
Yes, it's working.
You are fixing for them?
Yes.
Clap for yourself. You are still clap with you. You will learn work last. Please, ma, can my brother take small cold water from inside the machine?
The dispenser is not working. I'm sorry.
Don't go. They say it can shock you.
No, I can do it. I can repair it. Maybe the head or neutral wire is bad. Let me just quickly.
Hey.
A few moments later.
Well, I've done it. I'm back.
What?
They employ me.
Employ you?
Yes.
As what?
This I can be working with them since I've helped them to repair things. This is my letter.
Auntie?
They even give me a car.
They give you what?
A car.
No, Auntie, there is mistake. You
Congratulations.
can't employ him. And the one that come for interview is
The MD
bakery
decided to
manager,
hire your brother
interviewer
because he knows a
come.
lot about a lot of things.
You can't employ him. He's junior. He doesn't know anything. He's only
Let me show you
pressing
to your
on
office
phone.
and your official car.
It's only YouTube you know how to watch, Auntie.
But let me just follow them and go and see my new car. I'm coming.
He doesn't need official cars. Hey! Junior, I have phone. Me too, I have phone. I can be tired. It's me that will tire. Auntie, me too, I have you too.
Just joining us, you're welcome to the Never An Afterthought show. And today we've been discussing with my guest, with Mo, we've been discussing around education being the gateway to relevant skills for the fourth industrial revolution. You can always join this conversation with the hashtag Never An Afterthought and following our social media channels on Twitter at NAA_book, on Instagram and Facebook at NA Afterthought. And you can also drop me a note or by email, podcast@neveranafterthought.com, or better still, drop your comments on the comment section of the platform wherein you're listening to me or you are watching me. So Mo, it's been an exciting and engaging time. Sometimes we just wish we could continue this conversation for endlessly. But the truth is, these are conversations that do not stop here. These are conversations that are so embedded, and that's the reason why we use the social platform, right? The world is now social. So we use the social platform to continue to engage these conversations, and I'm sure you are going to get a lot of hits on your LinkedIn, on your social handles, because we'll be tweeting at you. But just before we wrap up, there's something you said. You said the world is teaching us already. That is so powerful, and I want to take that up to bring in again the concept of digital literacy, innovation, tech-enabled innovation, because when we think back again about our experience in COVID, it's really been tech and tech-enabled connections that has helped us to stay connected, to stay afloat, to have our businesses continue to thrive. But then we need to then look at us, in Nigeria, for example, where we know what our internet penetration is, what access again, even to digital is. But just as we're looking at that, I'd brought in an example of Paystack in one of our episodes, who recently, I think last month, Paystack is less than 5 years old, a tech startup, a Nigerian startup, even though a lot of hybrid investors. But they were acquired by a bigger global company for $200 million, a company of less than 5 years. And that speaks to this sole power of tech, innovation, digital literacy. So I want to bring it in to say that how really should this, how should this drive our consciousness? Because there's nothing you and I have said today that we do not know, right? As a people, as followers, as leaders, as policy makers. But how should this, ring into our consciousness to avoid that snap back to a normal that no longer exists post-COVID? What are your thoughts?
I think this is a very important point, Falabi. And, we came out of the Nigeria's annual education conference a couple of weeks ago. And there, the session that I was co-convening focused on how to foster a culture of innovation in education policy planning. And we had a wonderful conversation. We had a presentation by one of the co-leaders of the Center for Universal Education at the Brookings Institution. And she made some very important points. I think one of the points that she made that really struck home was, one, the importance of tackling issues of access, quality, and relevance at the same time. Because if you simply say we want all children to be in school, and then after that we'll start to think about what they're learning, and then after that we'll think about, whether we're preparing them for the world of work and preparing them for the quote-unquote 21st century, then we've missed the boat already. So I think in the first instance, we have to make sure that relevance and innovation are mainstreamed into how we plan education systems in Nigeria. And that means that when curriculum is being planned, you need to have even more representation by industry. Have technology representatives there, have representatives from engineering, science, tech, engineering, and math, have representatives from arts and culture. They need to be present when that curriculum is being reviewed, because it's reviewed every 5 years. Because then they will be able to make clear that, look, if we are going to focus as a country on raising another, 15 or 20 pay stacks, this is what we need to be teaching them. Maybe we need to be putting a bit more money into science and tech. Maybe we need to be setting up more innovation centers. Maybe we need to change the mathematics curriculum and integrate it with a bit of technology. Maybe these are the sorts of things that we need to start to do around curriculum. So when you have that robust and integrated conversation, what will happen is that the possibilities will become clearer. What we need to do will become clearer, and how we can do it will also become clearer. I think that another of the thoughts that came out from the NAA, this conference I'm referring to, which is hosted by the Federal Ministry of Education, was this need to shift from an overwhelming focus on brick and mortar to the real notion of learning. It's interesting that in a few states in Nigeria, including Lagos State and Edo State and a few other states, some in the north, the speed with which they were able to pivot at the beginning of the pandemic, to pivot from classes that are held in person, to radio, instructional radio in some instances, to giving out of worksheets to children in some instances, to providing content online in some instances, to television school in some instances. It was nothing short of remarkable. And I tell you the truth, it's a function of leadership, right? When we realize that we in no way can fund the number of schools and institutions of learning that we need, right? It is not that it is unlikely to happen, it is impossible. We don't have the money, and we are not going to have that money to fund the total number of institutions of learning that we need in terms of brick and mortar. It is therefore time for us to put on our innovation hat. It is time for us to ask ourselves, what can we shift, right, to another medium? And when I say another medium, I don't necessarily mean learning on time and online and real time. There are many ways by which you can learn remotely without having to use even 1 megabyte of data. There are many, many ways that it can be done. There are radio frequencies, there's so much that can actually be done. But it's about being real with ourselves and saying, look, we can't afford it. The money is just not there. Especially at the higher institutions where the costs become incredibly expensive.
Yes.
When a country like America is telling us we're pivoting very, very quickly, and we are sitting down and wanting to build more institutions, more physical institutions, without being strategic about how we're building these institutions, then we're setting ourselves up for failure. So those would be my comments. I think that it's really important, that we take a bird's eye view to how we are planning. If we truly want to have 15 more pay stacks, 20 more pay stacks, 100 more pay stacks, then it's really going to be concerted effort, both by the state sector, the public sector, and also by the non-state sector as well.
I mean, that's a multi-stakeholder approach, and that's what you do. That's your lifelong work at Tech, public-private partnership conversations. Thank you. And I'm going to, the last question I'm going to ask before time will really have to, shorten on us, is the world we live in now, and it's not just Nigeria, it's all over the globe, right? Parents are now becoming the teachers. It's been the same. I mean, growing up, my mom was our home teacher, right? So you learn in school, you bring back home, and it's really the teaching at home that really, in my view, strengthens and supports whatever you learn in school. But that's right now, the schools are at home. And our parents, we parents, are now the ones that are now saddled with that role of somewhat being now the primary teacher, even less of the secondary teacher that's a normal role. So I want to ask you, because we've spoken about who should be teaching, we've spoken about what should they be teaching. Now I want to ask, how should we be teaching? And I'm not asking more so now about the core teachers. It's important. It's the same answer for them as core teachers. But even us as home teachers or primary teachers now during this pandemic, because, and the reason is this, when in one of our episodes, and we were talking about what employers are looking for, and there was this question about how do you demonstrate that you possess these skills, to employers, and there were questions around simulations, case studies, which abound when you go in the world of work or for interviews and things like that. The question then is, shouldn't we be teaching our kids early on, in this manner of, learning in their own, and from our side, we teaching them. So how should we be teaching and how should they be learning? What's the difference? I know you guys have this. I don't want to misquote your terminologies, but that's your own space. Yeah.
One of the things that I'm going to do is I'm not going to use any jargon right now because I don't think it's helpful. I think what's helpful is to understand what the real issue is so that we can all address the real issue. You said it. The average parent had to become a teacher overnight, literally,
Exactly.
And in fact, that was actually for the more fortunate of parents, because there were some parents that didn't have the luxury of being able to teach their children, either because they just didn't know what to teach or how to, or simply because they couldn't afford to. They still had to go out somehow and fend for the family. So it's still a privilege, to even be able to do this. But one of the exercises that we embarked upon, the projects that we started during the pandemic as an organization, was we launched a podcast, and one of the episodes is called, one of the most popular episodes is actually called From Homeschooling to Harvard. And it was the story of one of our colleagues, at TEP Center, who was homeschooled, by her parents in Warri in Delta State, and ended up being accepted into Harvard University. Her brother started a PhD at the age of 21 in Harvard as well. And they're very, very well adjusted, socially. So they're not geeks or anything. They're wonderful people. When you sit down, with their parents, because what we did was we sat with them as a family and we asked them to explain to us what they did and what they felt that they did well. Other people reflected on these comments and simply remarked that these are just markers of good parenting. You said something earlier on, Afolabi. You talked about how your mom, sat with you at home, and she really was the homeschooler, the teacher at home, and how you believe that the school should complement what the parents do at home. I think that's the right place to start from. That notion that for the regular family where you have parents or guardians, with children, because we do have many irregular, families in Nigeria today for many different reasons, but for regular families, in that sense, it is important that we realize that the learning of the child actually begins at home. There's a reason why, the first 5 years in Nigeria are referred to as foundational years. When you think about a building, and I know this is something you're very familiar with as well, when you think about infrastructure and what it takes to build a house, the most important component is actually the foundation, because it is upon that foundation that the entire building rests. And that foundation will determine the height to which that building can go. And so in the first instance, it's about parents taking back that responsibility and saying, you know what, whatever we need to learn, however we need to learn it, from whomever we need to learn it, we are going to support our children's learning. It's also about the shift from this unhealthy focus on academic content when children are very, very young. A shift to helping children develop these core skills that we were referring to earlier on. Being able to help children understand what it means to be kind from the time they're young. Because in a country like Nigeria, it is useful to be kind, right? In the world that we live in, the difference between you and a machine may be that you are kind and the machine may not know how to be kind, right? So you talked about empathy earlier on, so I thought I'd just drop that in there. It's also about being able to appreciate nature, right? The climate change activists have told us what the future portends for us if we don't change our ways. Of what use is it to you to be a mathematical genius, but to live in a world that's going to implode on you in X number of years, right? So what I'm doing is I'm introducing different components which parents really need to begin to focus on, which as an educational system, again, I can't take away policymakers. Policymakers need to help to create an enabling environment so that parents have resources with which they can help their children learn. So it's really about instilling this love of learning in children. If a child loves to learn, and this was what our homeschooling to Harvard, podcast family was telling us about. When a child loves to learn from the time he or she is young, what happens is that they will always look for learning. And that's when you begin to talk about self-directed learning. They become their own teacher. They begin to curate their own curriculum, right? And then the so-called teacher morphs into a facilitator. And by the time you're on that track, you would find that the learner you're referring to is developing creative skills, flexibility, adaptability, curiosity. And these are all the elements that will differentiate us in the world that we're living in. So we've moved away, from the Industrial Revolution, we're in the fourth Industrial Revolution. This isn't about, making pins in a factory or cutting up clothes in some sort of, warehouse. This is really about what's in your mind and what's in your heart. That's where the world is going, and so being able to support the process of developing these skills and competencies very early on. Notice I'm talking only about early years, because if you get it right from the foundation, you're unlikely to have problems at the secondary level and at the tertiary level. And perchance you do, you will know how to fix those problems. Because why? You are a lifelong learner. And so you will find how to fix those problems because you have learned how to be a solution provider for yourself. So that's what I'll say about that.
Thanks, Mo. Thanks. I think we have come to the maximum that our time will afford us. We will allow our audience to be the judge, but by their comments and their feedback. But I'm sure, just from what I'm watching already, the chat comments are buzzing. I can tell that there may be a comeback. You may be back by popular demand. But let me say thank you so much for honoring us at very short notice, and thanks for all the sacrifice you had to make to be able to join us tonight. It's been an interesting time. Tonight. We've learned quite a bit from Mo. I didn't expect less, just by judging by who she is and what she does. And I'm sure that we can see why education is the bedrock. It's a bedrock of society, and in our, just like the topic said today, it's a gateway to relevant skills for the fourth industrial revolution. But I think of everything she said a lot of powerful things, and you've watched and listened yourself. But I think one thing that I want to close with is the concept of education versus schooling. Schooling is a place, like she said, school is a place, but education is lifelong. And that's what I want to leave with each and every one of us, because this conversation is really about us. She's spoken a whole lot about what our policymakers are doing, should be doing, and the fear about us not, snagging back to the norm pre-COVID, which really that norm is really it does not really exist anymore. The 21st century that I would like to quote, it's 20 years old already. I'm sure you can imagine what your 20-year-old can and is doing in life. So, for me, I think the point is about your future is in your hands. Your development is in your hands, and it's in your hands through lifelong learning. It's in your hands through the multi-channels that are available for you. She mentioned it, information overload. You really cannot say you don't have information. The YouTube is there. So much content. I was watching a Frank Donga, a skit on Frank Donga on social media earlier in the week. You know, it just tells you so much content is available there for you to do it yourself. In other words, there's so many videos on how you can do. You just need to type how to on Google, and so many used to be before it's only written. Now there are videos, so you've got so much materials that can help you to pursue your journey on lifelong learning. And never forget that Adora taught us last week that one of the other things for us as humans is the ability to improve. We can improve, and that's the ability that we have as humans. We can change our behaviors, we can change our habits, we can improve. And so please, if you were never a fan of lifelong learning, if you really want to be relevant in the fourth industrial revolution, it's not just theory right now, it's upon us. The reality is upon us. So please take this seriously, and that's so much that time can afford us. I really want to thank Mo for our time and the interesting conversation. That's the thing about this conversation. We can go on and on and on, but we have to be mindful of your time. So till I come your way again, remember, you can always follow this conversation on using the hashtag Never An Afterthought on all our social media channels. Twitter at NAA_book. Facebook and Instagram at NA Afterthought, and you can drop me emails at our email, which is podcast@neveranafterthought.com. Of course, I can see your comments, that the chat lines are buzzing already. I can see your comments, so I don't need to mention that, right? But don't worry, next episode we will be reading out some of your comments across that we glean across the various media. Till I come your way again, stay safe, Stay well and what? Keep winning. God bless you. Thank you.